Well, I want to welcome you to the conclusion of a 3-part series that we've been calling Seek, Trust, Depend. Can I hear someone say seek, trust, depend? I didn't plan it this way, but it just happened this way, and I'm gonna take advantage of it because my mom would do this to me when I was a kid. She would do word associations, and so it just so happened that each letter, it starts with seek, S, trust, T, depend, D. S, T, D. And my plan and my reasoning for doing that is so that no matter where you go, even when you go to the end of your life, you're going to remember that weird pastor in that small church in West Sacramento who taught me about seeking, trusting, and depending. And the reason you remembered it because you associated it with something that was different, right? So you're gonna go to your deathbed knowing what it looks like to be a Jesus follower, that you seek the Lord, you trust the Lord, you depend on the Lord. In week 1, I just wanna kind of like just do a brief recap on where we've been and where we are. In week 1, we found ourselves seeking God. And it wasn't that we were looking for him, but that we were looking what? Looking to him. Someone say looking to him.
Looking to him.
All right. So we weren't looking for him, but we were looking to him. And as we were looking to him, we found ourselves at the feet of Jesus. And at the feet of Jesus, we discovered that this is where we find our joy. It's at the feet of Jesus where we find our peace, our strength, our hope, our healing, our deliverance. We just keep going on and on and on. We discovered that everything we could ever possibly need in this life is found when we find ourselves at the feet of Jesus. Amen. Can I hear someone say seek?
Seek.
Yeah, and then in week 2, we talked about what it means and what it looks like to trust God. And we learned that trusting is the natural and practical consequence of having faith in God. It's the outward and visible expression and response to an inward conviction. It's what we call works. It's not what saves us, but rather it's the evidence and the proof of our salvation. We read where James, he says that faith without works is dead. That faith without the evidence, without the proof, isn't faith at all. Just as the spirit apart from the body is dead, faith without works, faith without that trust in action, that outward evidence and that outward proof. He questioned and he was getting us to see that it's not a real faith. It's a fake faith, a false faith, I should say. But a real, true faith will be followed up and be accompanied by trusting and by works. And we saw where Jesus. Well, actually, let me back up here. And so that's what James was saying. He was saying that faith will always be accompanied by works. You can count on it. And then Jesus, he said that in the same way that you can identify a tree by its fruit, so you can identify people by their actions. Jesus said that. In other words, our actions are the fruit of our faith, the fruit of what we believe, the fruit, the proof, and the evidence of our internal convictions. That's good. I love that. That's so good. So glad I came this morning. But today I want us to hone in on that word depend. Can I hear someone say depend? Depend. And I want to share a message with you that I'm calling Don't Let Go. Don't let go. Would you just elbow your neighbor and just say, don't let go? Look at the person on the other side, the person you were trying to avoid, and say, it's going to be okay. Don't let go. What does it mean and what does it look like for a person to depend on God? And I was thinking about this past week, and for a person that is dependent, they can't see how their life could possibly function without that thing. Separated from that substance or that person or that object or that routine, life just doesn't feel right. There's an emptiness, there's a lack, there's a void without it. For some reason, we've allowed our lives to be hinged and dependent on this one thing, or sometimes in certain cases, in certain seasons, it can be a group of things. We'll catch ourselves thinking about this thing when we're at work, or while we're eating, or while we're driving down the street. We're not trying to think about it, but we just do. Anybody with me? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Yeah. For those of you that aren't raising your hand, we'll pray for you. Get that lying spirit out of you. We're all family here. But we'll be thinking about it while we're standing in line at the grocery store and think, why am I thinking of that? No matter where we are or what we're doing, we're thinking about this thing. We become dependent. And it's funny how whether we reach the pinnacle, we reach the mountaintop, we're thinking about it. Or if we're down in the dumps, we're in the gutter, we're struggling with life, we're thinking about it, right? That thing that we become dependent on. And if I could just be a little transparent with you today, because I truly believe that the things we go through weren't meant to be hidden, or the things in our past that we went through weren't meant to be hidden, but they were used to be a blessing for the young people coming up, or someone who might be in the thick of it right now, or who might have already gone through it to wonder, is there life for me? Is there hope for me now? And so what we go through, what we've been through, maybe as a child, when we grow up, many times we want to suppress, we want to hide. I grew up in a church, or in the church age, when a lot of that stuff, I don't know if you experienced the same thing, but where a lot of that stuff was, you were frowned upon if you were struggling with something. So every time someone would ask you, how you doing? I'm doing great. When really you're just hurting and you're struggling and you can't be honest with people. You can't express to someone, I thought this was family. And then we come to the place where we should be the most safe. We come to church and we're getting the same thing that we were getting out in the world. We're having to hide what we went through. But I'm here to tell you that God, He is the God of healing. He is the God of breakthrough. He is the God of recovery. He is the God of breaking walls. And when those walls are broken, people need to hear about it. So yeah, you don't have to give all the juicy details that might do more harm than good, but to relay to people, the people around you who may be going through it. Because I believe what God will do, He will take your hurt, your pain, your struggle, what you went through, to be a blessing and a help, and to help someone else, maybe in the next generation, to be able to overcome, or maybe even miss the whole thing altogether. You know what I mean? Or while someone's going through it, to help hold their hand through it. Yeah, you're not alone. I've been right there with you. I know what it feels like. And you can empathize with them because they're human just like you. They're created by God just like you. Or if they've already been through it and they're wanting to give up, they've been through it and they just don't know how they can live another day or breathe another breath because of feeling the guilt and the shame of what was done to them. And that's where God will take the curse of the enemy, will take what the enemy meant for harm, what the enemy meant for evil, and He will turn it for good. Because you are willing to share with them the darkest corners of your life, where God came in and He became the light, so that you can be the light in their life, so that they can be healed, so that they can be delivered. Are you following me? Yes. Man, I want to be a church that knows that, not just knows it, but lives that. I don't want to come to church where I have to wonder if someone's looking over my shoulder. Because what I found out in this life is that whatever you're looking for, you're going to find. If you're looking for flowers, you'll find flowers. If you're looking for a desert, you're going to find the desert. If you're looking for sin in someone's life, guess what you're going to find? You're going to find that sin. If you're looking for the good in people, I'm telling you, perspective, you're going to find it. And so with that said, I want to be a little transparent with you today and share with you that one of the most difficult things in my life that I was dependent on was something that I picked up in high school. Have you noticed this, that a lot of the things that we struggle with as adults, we didn't pick up in our adult years, but they were picked up, many of the stuff that we struggle with as adults, we picked up in elementary school or junior high or high school. And for some of us, we picked it up in college. We picked up these habits and we become dependent on them. But I want to share with something that I became dependent on in high school. I played baseball all the way from T-ball all the way up to my varsity year of high school. In my senior year of high school, I was the starting third baseman. I'm not bragging, but this is factual information. Starting first baseman, I took pride in that position. I practiced every single day because I wanted to be the best that I could possibly be for my team, for my coach, and for my school, River City High School. But what happened was during one of the baseball seasons, I was introduced to a substance that maybe you've heard of before. It's called chewing tobacco. And some of the other baseball players were doing it, and I was super curious. And I said, hey, let me try it. And of course, they were so willing to offer it to me. Let me try it. First one's always free, right? Fast forward a few years later, and I was still doing it. Long after baseball was gone, long after my high school friends were nowhere to be found, I was addicted, and my body was dependent on this nasty substance. I didn't even want it anymore. Have you been in that situation where you're doing something? Why am I doing this? I didn't even want it anymore, but mentally and physically and emotionally and psychologically, my life had become dependent. I was locked and I was in chains to this substance. And believe it or not, it would call my name when it knew that I was trying to quit. For those of you who have struggled with a dependency, you know that voice. Doesn't matter what dependency it is or what struggle it is. That voice always comes to taunt. It comes to guilt and shame. It's the same voice that convinced you to do it in the first place. Then after you do it, why did you do that? And it slaps you upside the head, make you feel guilt and shame. And so I had this voice. Every time it knew I was trying to quit, it would say things like, just drive past the liquor store. You don't have to get out. You don't have to do anything, but just drive past the liquor store. Just drive by. What could it possibly hurt? And moments later, after wrestling with that voice, I'd find myself walking out of the liquor store with that substance in my back pocket, driving home with guilt in my heart and my mind full of shame. No one knew about it but me and God, and I guess the enemy knew as well, right? Driving home with guilt in my heart, my mind full of shame, spending money on something that was only hurting me, putting that something in my mouth that had lied to me in my youth. I'd become dependent on something that didn't have the ability to give me anything of value, but was only able to rob me of my value. And that's the thing about it. When we become dependent on anything other than God, it can only give you so much, and then it has a threshold. It can't go any further, and it has to drop you off. But when you trust in God and you depend on God, there's no limit. And instead of taking from you and robbing you of your value. You see, when I was dependent on that substance, what it was doing, it was messing with my mind. It was messing with my life. And it was robbing me of the value that I had. And I wasn't able to be used in a way that I should have been used, that God created me to be used. And for years, I prayed and prayed and prayed to God. God, just take it away. Lord, I don't want it anymore. I don't even know why I do it. Just, God, would you just take it away? Take away this addiction. Take away this dependency. And guess what? He wouldn't do it. Wah, wah, right? He wouldn't do it. But check this out. In that prayer, in that consistently going to God, in that prayer, because I'm telling you, no communication is always bad communication when it comes to God. Any communication when it comes to God is good communication. As long as that communication is still alive, is still active. I don't care if it's good, bad, or questionable. Don't shut off the line. Don't call AT&T and say, hey, I'm gonna cut off the line of the communication between me and God, right? Keep that satellite open. Whether it's good, bad, or questionable. Continue to communicate your heart. Communicate what's going on in your life, your struggles, your defeats, your victories, and your overcoming situations, right? Keep that communication open. But it was with that prayer and that constant communication where I was telling God to take it away. Make it easy, Lord. That's what the fine print. Make it easy on me. But it was in that prayer that he told me exactly what he wanted me to do. And when it became clear to me what he wanted me to do and what I needed to do, I said, Lord, anything but that. Anything, Lord. I will do anything. You can use me any place, anywhere. Have me do anything. Don't make me do that. And I want to share with you what that thing was in just a moment. But I want you to know that it involved becoming completely dependent on him rather than on me and my strength or my own wisdom. You see, when a person is truly seeking, when a person is truly trusting and depending on God, that person will always find themselves walking away from their own desires, their own plans, their own ways, their own way of doing things, their own wisdom, and begin to do it God's way. They turn away from their old way of doing things, and they turn to God and hold on to his strength. They will hold on to his joy, his peace, and all of his promises. And they find out that he is the only one that is truly dependable. He is a source whose tank is never on empty. His capacity to carry us has no threshold, has no limit. And I want us to take a look at John 15. I've preached on this before, but I felt like it was super relevant to what we're talking about today. Being dependent on God. John 15, starting with that first verse, these are the words of Jesus. He's talking to his disciples and he says, I am the true vine, and the Father is the gardener. Another translation says that the Father is the vine dresser. He says he cuts off, God the Father cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit. And this is funny because this is what we talked about last week, about how a faith without works is dead. And so a faith without that trust, without that outward expression, living by faith, walking by faith, living it outwardly, what's happening on the inside. If there's no works, there's no faith. You can't have faith without also having works. It's that trust. We're depending on God. It's that walking by faith. And so he says he cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit. He's talking about a faithless branch. A branch that has no faith. It's not bearing any fruit. While every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes. So he cuts off the branch without fruit, and then he prunes or cleans the branch that does bear fruit. Why does he do that? So that it will be even more fruitful, so it'll bear more fruit. He says, you are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Verse 4, remain in me as I also remain in you. He says, don't let go. don't let go of me, because I'm not going to let go of you. Regardless of your situation, no matter how bad and how bleak it may seem, no matter how good life is going, don't let go. Remain in me as I also remain in you. He says no branch, now he's giving the reason why, no branch can bear fruit by itself. I've never seen a branch that was separated from the tree or the vine able to live on its own. You're going to be watching that. You're going to be looking for that alive branch, right? You're going to prove the pastor wrong. Do it. Observe. Every branch that separates itself from the vine, from the trunk, from the source, will eventually die. And I was thinking about this as I was studying, and we had just gone to Costco and we bought some grapes. And these grapes were so good. We still have some. And I was thinking about when I picked the grape off, and I was like, this isn't attached to anything. But as I picked it off and I bit into it, it had this crunch, it had this bite to it. You know, we had just come out of the fridge, it was cold, it snapped as I bit into it. It was snappy. And it was juicy and it tasted so good, but I began to think of the dangers of separating ourselves from the vine, from the source, from the trunk of that tree, because the death doesn't show up immediately. The effects of the death doesn't show up right away, and so it can lead us astray and think, oh, I'm okay. The grape still has snap to it. Give it a week. Give it about a week and a half, depending on the weather, right? If it's hot or cold. In about a week, the snap will start turning into mush. The juice will be gone. It will begin to start tasting sour and off. You're like, ugh, throw these things away. They're of no value. Why do we buy these things? Honey, they were good last week. Are you getting the illustration here, the comparison here of how dangerous it can be when we separate ourselves from Christ? And just because day one doesn't look like, hey, still got a pulse, still got my job, family still together, still got a home, and we begin to put our dependence on those things rather than on the one who supplied all of those things. And eventually, every single one of those things will get to a place where they can't give us what we need them to give us anymore, and we'll find out. We'll become like that grape that becomes old. You bite into it, you're like, ugh. You spit it out in the garbage. And that's what I see with what Jesus is saying here. He says, no branch can bear fruit by itself. What does it have to do? It must remain in the vine. It's gotta remain attached to the vine. He says, he brings it around and he points at his disciples. He looks at his disciples and he says, neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. Can I hear someone say, don't let go? Don't let go. Jesus, he says in that 5th verse, he says, I am the vine. You are the branches, just in case you didn't get it. He says, if you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. What we can do is we can look into the world and see how they're doing it, and from the outward appearance, or from Instagram, or from TikTok, or from Facebook, we can look at their lives and think, wow, they're doing so good. But you only got a snippet of a snippet of a snippet that was edited to the tilt. Like, ugh. It was edited. You didn't see all the crying and the snot that was flowing before the picture was taken and afterwards, and the yelling and the arguing, the complaining. You only saw the snippet. And if we cannot get distracted by people who aren't attached to the vine. We can't let someone else's standard become ours. The standard has already been written.
That's right.
It's already been set. It's the same yesterday, today, and forever, and it's not going anywhere. After everything burns up, after everything is gone, guess what will remain? God's word shall remain. You don't have to worry about that.
Amen.
Yeah, come on, give the Lord the praise. Come on, yeah. This is good. This is important. He says, I'm the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. 6, if you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers, sort of like that, those grapes. Such branches are picked up and thrown into the fire and burned. He says, if you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. He says, this is my Father's glory. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit. This is a desire that God the Father has in each one of his children, each one of his kids, each one of his creation, that we bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. And when I saw that word showing, when you think of the word showing, it's something that people see. It's not a secret, church. It's not something that we're ashamed of. It's what brought us life in the first place. It's what brought us out of the darkness and into his glorious light. It's what brought us out of that guilt and shame into forgiveness and deliverance. And so as Jesus followers, we're not just hanging on. We're not just surviving. We're not just rotting on the tree and hanging on for dear life, but we are active. We're being alive. We're being the difference in the world around us. We're being the light in a world that is living in the darkness. We're being that voice that stands up for not what's popular or culturally appropriate, but what is right, what is just, what is holy, and what is pleasing to God. Would you give God a praise this morning if you believe that? Don't let go. In that 9th verse, Jesus says, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. It's something that we must do on our part. We must remain. In some seasons, we've got to be still because there's been so much chaos. Be still and know that I'm God. In other seasons, we've got to be walking by faith because it's hot back there. We're not running away from our struggles or our problems or our situations, but we're running toward Christ, running toward his standard. If you keep my commandments, he says in that 10th verse, if you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. He says, I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete, or your joy would be full. It would be right where God intended it to be, where you are depending on him. Depending on him to be your source of strength, your source of hope, your source of deliverance, your source of peace. Everything that you need, that he is our source. And I love how he says, I've told you this. It's like, I said all that so I can tell you this. I've told you this so that my joy, it's my joy, may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. It may be lived out to the fullest. And isn't that what we're looking for? Aren't we all looking for joy and peace and hope? But whatever we become dependent on will inevitably fill our hearts, our lives, and our minds with whatever they have. Did you catch that? Let me say it again. Whatever we become dependent on, whatever we find ourselves remaining in or holding on to, will inevitably fill our hearts and our lives and our minds with whatever they have. And I know that so many of us have been so frustrated and so disappointed time and time again because we thought it would turn out different this time. I made a mistake last time, but I'm going to do it right this time. We thought that that person, that place, or that thing was going to be able to give us what we actually needed this time. And every time we act so surprised. You say, Pastor, I don't get surprised. No, we act surprised in our reaction, in our frustration in that person, that place, or that thing. Why couldn't you be there for me when I needed you? Why is it that you always fail me, or the thing breaks, or the routine doesn't work like it used to? And we start dreaming about the way it used to be. And living back there where life was, in quotes, good. So we act surprised. It's funny because I'm not saying that you act surprised. I say we act surprised when it doesn't work out the way that we thought it should. It's because we're depending on something that didn't have the strength or the ability to carry us or to carry the weight that we were putting on it. Right? You see, Jesus came into the world that he created knowing exactly what he was getting himself into. He knew that we were depending on things that didn't have the ability to give us what we actually needed. That's kind of why he came. Humankind had become so dependent on self, so dependent and attached to other things, and it was killing us. It was robbing us of our value. And so Jesus, what he's saying is, he's saying, remain in me. Keep my commands and don't let go. It'll turn out to the glory of God the Father, but it's also going to turn out for your good. Jesus is saying, don't let go. Keep pushing, keep fighting, keep living, keep listening, keep following, keep obeying. And everything that I have to offer will end up filling you up when you remain in me, when you depend on me, and when you refuse to let go. So what was it that triggered my breakthrough? What was it that snapped the neck of my addiction, that dependency that caused me to be free? You see, God gave me one specific instruction. The one thing that caused me to say, Lord, anything but that. What did he say? He said, go and confess what you're holding on to your Father. The one person I didn't want to disappoint. The one person that I didn't want to let down. Go to that guy. Confess to him. Tell him everything. Put everything out on the table. Because my dad, he was also my pastor, a mentor, friend. And to have to share the deepest, dude, God, seriously, can I just tell you? He said, you've been telling me for the past umpteen years, whatever years, how many years it was. He said, it's time for you to be delivered. The thing about it was I never got confirmation that this would be the one thing that would get my breakthrough. But I knew that I had to do it. I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. Because the options weren't looking very good for me. If I was going to tell my dad. It was this one thing for me, and to realize that I want to emphasize for me, because for everyone it's going to be something different. God is going to give you, in your situation, according to your circumstance in the world that you live in, he's going to give you a specific instruction that you have to follow. You can't follow my standard, the standard that's been given to me. You got to follow the standard. And when God speaks to you, you've got to obey his voice. You've been seeking, you've been trusting, you've been depending. And what this will do is this will lead you to your healing. And this is the one thing for me that would be the outward showing that I was attaching myself to the vine. That I wasn't depending on my own way or my own desires, but that I was depending on God for my deliverance. All the way up to this point, even though I had been praying, I was relying on me. And obviously I didn't have the strength to do what I wanted to do, what I needed to do. And I kept picturing myself going into my 30s, my 40s, 50s, and 60s, carrying the same weight, the same burdens, the same struggles. I didn't want to get old with the habits from my youth, because I knew that's where I was headed. Because I knew that God had a better plan. God had a better life planned for me. He had a better purpose for me. And so I went and I confessed to my father. It was so hard. Tears rolling down my cheeks. Spilling my guts out to my dad. I don't think we ever talked about it after that. And I don't even know what he was thinking, you know, now that I'm a father. Like, how crushing to your heart, of the heart of a father, to hear such dark stuff coming from your son, you know? So I went, I confessed to my father, and it was the best thing that I ever did. He received me and encouraged me. And at that very moment, I was set free and I was delivered. No turning back. I haven't been the same since. My faith in God was accompanied by my dependence on him. That outward showing of an inward conviction. I had actually leaned on God for my deliverance, and he showed up and he answered the cry of my heart. I want to close with Psalm 18. I want to encourage you, if you don't already have a reading plan, to wake up every morning, even before you go to bed, every morning, every night, to read Psalm 18, 2 and 3. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, or he is the power and the strength of my salvation. He is my stronghold. I call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemies. Church, we have every reason to seek, to trust, and to depend on God. He's a present help in times of trouble. He is our rock. He is our fortress. He is our deliverer. Don't let go. And continue to listen, follow, and obey his voice, his word, and his instruction for your life. And he will continue to fill you up with his love, his joy, his peace, his strength, his deliverance. Everything that he has to offer, he will pour out into your lap, into your heart, into your life. Can I hear an amen? Amen. Right there where you are, will you just bow your head and close your eyes? God, I pray over every single person this morning who is struggling with depending on you. Maybe they're struggling with an addiction. Maybe they're struggling with a worry or an attitude or bitterness or anger or doubt. Whatever it is, God, I know nothing is too big for you to handle. But I ask, Lord God, that you would give us the strength to step out of our prayer closet and begin to step towards you. To listen to your voice. To follow your voice. And to obey your voice. That no matter how hard it may seem in the moment, that if we will follow your instruction, that it will always turn out for your glory, but it will always turn out for our good. For some of us, we need to rip the Band-Aid off. And Lord God, I just pray that you would give us the strength to do that. For some of us, we just need to walk toward your calling and your purpose that you've placed over our lives. But whatever it is, Lord God, would you make it absolutely clear within each and every life at the sound of my voice, so that you can bring your deliverance, your peace, your joy, and your strength as we depend on you. We thank you, Lord.